Welcome back to Hatoraid Live, the Hatoraid Hour podcast. I am your host, Jordan, aka Hatoraid Cowboy, and I'm super excited about today's live stream. We've got Epson. We're going to be talking about Epson projectors. We're going to be talking about some of their technology, some of the choices that they've made. I have an Epson projector. I have a QB1000 that I own. I've had multiple Epson projectors in my home theater. Love them, so I'm really excited to have the guys on today. So we have Rob, Brennan, and Melvin from Epson. How's it going, guys?
Doing great, Jordan, and thrilled to be here. I'm super excited to have a great discussion about projection and Epson and all the good fun stuff.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you guys. Thanks you for taking some time out on this Friday evening, Rob, Melvin. So yeah, we're going to be talking about pixel shifting versus 4K. We're going to be talking about the new Q Series lineup. Brightness Revolution, got some really exciting stuff for you guys. And if you have any questions or any comments, make sure you put them in the chat. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll try to address your comments. But I wanted to get started by having Rob and Melvin, maybe you can kind of give a brief introduction of, who you are, what you've been doing, or what you do with the company. Rob, you want to start that off?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Rob Brennan, and I am the technical account manager at Epson, specifically responsible for the premium residential and a projector lineup. So most of my job revolves around supporting our resellers, or our what we would call the CI channel, or custom integration channel. So these are your local dealers that are out there, across the country, all of North America, where you can go in and not only purchase Epson products, but also interact with designers, to do kind of custom work, very bespoke, kind of everything from home theater all the way down to media rooms and whatnot. So my role is to ultimately support them from a technical perspective. And then I also work with Melvin on some of the more product marketing and management, but I'll let him speak more about that because he's responsible for all the big brain ideas at Epson.
Yeah, and hi Jordan, hi everybody. Melvin Diaz, product manager here at Home Entertainment at Epson. Been with the company for just about 3 years now, and responsible for product management. My primary product category is Home Pro. Any products that are designed for the CI channel, and as Rob mentioned, a lot of product marketing responsibility, understanding what's there in terms of technology that we can integrate within our projectors, understanding the lay of the land in terms of what is our customer feedback and how do we integrate this all into our roadmap. So I work closely with our Japan headquarters to make sure that we get you the products that you're asking for.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for letting everybody know what you guys do. So yeah, I wanted to talk about Epson because you guys have been doing some really exciting stuff with your projectors with the Q Series. You guys are shaking up the market. I interviewed Melvin last year at CEDIA. We had a good sit down talk about how, I think Melvin, you had said that you guys kind of surveyed the CI market and some of the viewers and stuff, and they felt like maybe Epson was a little bit on the cheaper side and you guys wanted to change that. So what went into deciding to go with this, higher, kind of more high-end projector lineup?
Yeah, well, we took a first foray of dabbling into the CI channel quite a few years ago with the Pro Cinema line. And I can't believe it's just been 2 years. Like just 2 years ago, we only had two models in our lineup, the Pro Cinema 4050 and the Pro Cinema LS12000. We did see a lot of success with the LS12000, but although our dealers were really satisfied and our consumers were also really satisfied with the performance and the price point of that unit, they felt that Epson could do more. And so we listened to the voice of the customer, both our consumers and, more importantly, the custom integration channel. And yeah, they said we can absolutely go higher in brightness, higher in price point, and create a product lineup that really resonated with the channel and create a product that could resonate with their customer base. Because what they're seeing in terms of ticket prices for home theaters overall were a lot bigger. Like they could support more expensive projectors, more expensive audio-visual experiences. And we wanted to be able to, play in that area. And it's been great. And, like, thank you for your support, Jordan, in
Yes, sir.
making, making this happen.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking off screen, but I've had my first projector that I ever bought was the Epson 5040. So that was a fan favorite. First projector I ever, projector and screen. Had that one for quite a few years, 3-4 years, and then I had the LS 12,000, and then right after that, you guys announced the QB 1000. So I actually own the QB 1000. That's the one I have in my theater, my daily driver. Love it. Have that paired with a Mad VR, and it's just an awesome experience. So I'm a big fan of Epson and what you guys are doing.
Nice.
So let's talk about projectors or large scale TVs, because this is something that's kind of been, I don't want to say controversial, but a lot of people now are saying like, oh, TVs are getting to be 100 inches, 110 inches, projectors are going to go, by the wayside, they're going to die off. And I'm like, hold on let's not jump our guns here, because for me, and Rob, you can talk more about this, but you're very limited with a large scale TV. Even with the smaller TV, you're limited with speaker placement and stuff like that. But for me, I've always felt that projectors just have a certain look, and there's a certain cinematic look and feel that TVs just don't have. And to me, I don't think they'll ever have. So why would you say, a projector, going with the projector over a large scale TV is beneficial?
And Jordan, that really is the $1,000,000 question, right? When a customer is considering maybe their first projector, it's an obvious question to kind of ask. And so there are several things that projection brings that is not only very unique, but also very beneficial to the end user. I'm going to start where you ended with the actual visual look and feel. The way that our bodies are designed to work is to perceive the world through reflected light, right? Everything we look at, from the monitor I'm looking, maybe not the monitor here I'm looking at, but my walls and this coffee mug here. This is all light reflecting off of these surfaces and coming to my eye. And projection operates with the same basic technology, compared to a television, which is emissive light, right? So essentially the light is being shot directly from the television itself, whether it's OLED based or LCD based. And so it creates a different viewing experience. And it's hard to kind of explain what it is outside of very anecdotal kind of information. I'll tell you this much. I have in my home lots of TVs. I have very high-end, very advanced, very cutting-edge televisions in pretty much every room in my house. And I also have a projector. And while I can sit down and I can enjoy my quantum dot OLED television, and I can marvel at the perfect black level, and I can, in my living room, I have a mini LED based, LCD television, and I can marvel at the specular highlights and the dynamic range that an ultra high brightness flat panel TV can deliver. The simple fact of the matter is I enjoy watching my projector more than either of those experiences. Not only do I enjoy it more, it's more comfortable. I can sit down and watch for hours and hours on end without getting the sense of fatigue that sometimes you can find yourself kind of dealing with when it comes to television. So from a performance perspective, there's that. There are a few other really interesting things that projection can do. I always make this joke when I'm talking to new salesmen, and they're kind of getting into this industry for the first time and trying to figure out how do I sell a projector. And one of the things I'll point out is that when this home was built, when the architect designed this house years before I ever purchased it, they knew where my couch was going to go, because they designed a big flat empty wall in my living room where the TV goes, and therefore they determined where my couch and my coffee table and my chairs and how my life was going to be oriented. And largely that's true. I orient my furniture, my lifestyle, my aesthetic around my television. And with the projector, you don't have to do that. You can pair a projector with motorized screens. You can put a projector on a motorized lift. You have more installation flexibility. You also, of course, as you mentioned audio, the speakers, right? So if you don't want to deal just with the audio that's built into your TV, which isn't great to begin with, you are limited on where those speakers are going to go. And especially if you go to these ultra large flat panels, these 115-inch TVs, you need to have that room left and right, above and below for your LCR speakers. With the screen for a projector, you have the option to do acoustically transparent. So the speakers can be placed in more flexible, kind of locations. And those are just a few of the kind of key advantages, not only for your aesthetic, but also for the kind of the visual performance that a projector can deliver, that a TV can't. TVs look fantastic when you're sitting and watching them. The downside is when you turn them off, they're still just this big black rectangle hanging on your wall. So whether it's an aesthetically driven choice or a performance driven choice, or quite frankly, the standpoint of everybody owns a TV, but few people own projectors. There are plenty of us, but still as a percentage of the population, if you want to stand out amongst your peer group, if you want your home to be the preferred place to come over and watch the game, or you want to have a movie night and have friends and family choose to come to your residence, having a unique viewing experience also plays into that, that environment as well. So I agree with you. I don't think projection's going anywhere anytime soon, but I'm not here to tell you that TVs are terrible. TVs are fantastic. Have both if you can, right? If you can't, projector is the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I was also talking off screen. I was saying that there's a certain wow factor when people come over to your home theater. If you have maybe like even if you just have it in your living room or something, but when people come over to the home theater, it's like, oh wow, you actually like having a projector makes the theater actually feel more like a cinematic, like I'm at the cinema versus a TV. Because when you go to the cinema, what are they using? They're using a projector. They're using two projectors, just on a massive 300-inch whatever. So there's that too. And yeah, I don't think projectors are going anywhere. In fact, I actually think that it's kind of booming. Especially with what you guys are doing. There's so many good projectors now, but I think what you guys are doing, with the brightness and everything is just it's pretty incredible. So along that vein, let's talk about something that's also very divisive: pixel shifting versus native 4K. Now, I saw an interview that you did, Rob. I guess it was a few months ago, and I thought it was interesting because I've always wondered myself. It's like, okay, when's Epson gonna go with the native 4K? And then the new projectors come out and it's pixel shifting. So I've never had a problem with it. I've always said that most people will not be able to tell the difference unless you have a native 4K projector and a pixel shifting projector side by side. But I think it's interesting when people find out why Epson continues to use pixel shifting versus native 4K. So do you want to talk about why you guys prioritize pixel shifting versus native 4K?
Absolutely. And it's a great question. Again, another fantastic question. There's this, you want to make sure that, and be sensitive to the fact that a consumer doesn't want to feel like they've missed out on something. And so, yes, in case anyone was under any kind of misconception, Epson projectors do utilize pixel shifting in order to create the 4K image on screen. So it is 4K on screen. All 8.3 million pixels are individually represented, individually addressable. You can throw up a 4K test pattern and alternating columns, alternating rows, and you can see all of that resolutions on the screen. But then the question really becomes, why use pixel shift in lieu of native, 4K resolution? And there is a reason for that, and it has to do with brightness. Projectors have largely needed to evolve for a good while when you really think about it. For all the reasons we talked about just a few minutes ago when it comes to the difference between flat panel TVs and projectors, other pressures do exist within the marketplace. Not as many customers are building dedicated, single purpose, kind of spaces like theater rooms. Instead of theater rooms, you have a lot of multi-purpose rooms or game rooms or bonus rooms where just maybe just a big TV is where they're naturally kind of thinking they're going to go. And in order to be able to work in these non-traditional spaces where there's ambient light, you do need considerably more brightness. You also, of course, want to be able to project an image that's larger, than a standard television. And so now that TVs are regularly available in the 100-inch category, projectors really should be able to deliver a larger or more immersive viewing experience. So you're pushing, 130, 140, maybe 150-inch screens. Again, brightness is required in order to do that. So brightness really is the key to projection, not only its future, but also to unlock this higher level of performance. And with pixel shifting, essentially, it is more light efficient. More light can be passed through the imager that ends up on screen. So when you take a look at Epson's pixel shift technology and you compare it to other projectors that are available in the market from other manufacturers that are using quote unquote native 4K, and you compare those projectors, dollar for dollar, MSRP to MSRP, you're going to find that Epson projectors pretty much always are going to offer not only more brightness, but considerably more brightness. And that, again, is because of the pixel shifting technology being much more light efficient. More light can pass through and ultimately end up on screen. So there's a relationship that exists between these various considerations. And ultimately, brightness is, if not the most important, one of the most important characteristics for not only high impact HDR, larger projector screens, but also being able to account for ambient light conditions. And brightness ultimately, in order to keep a compact chassis that's also has quiet operation, pixel shifting is an excellent way to achieve that level of performance.
Nice.
Yeah, Jordan, we use, Rob said it well, we use pixel shifting to achieve brightness. And that brightness is because we're able to take that laser module or whatever light source and just get that light out through that projection lens so efficiently. What that means is we're not generating as much heat. We are more compact in size. And because we're not generating as much heat and we're more compact in size, we don't need to run that fan super high to cool down something that, effectively the light has to go somewhere, and if it's not going anywhere, it's being turned into heat, right? So we run cooler, we run the fan cooler, therefore we don't need to generate as much noise, therefore we're quieter. Because we're compact and quiet, that means you can put this projector pretty much anywhere. You don't need a hush box, you don't need to build a soffit. It's extremely flexible in terms of installation. And then that becomes another benefit to our pixel shifting strategy, in that we can create compact, precise, and efficient projectors that really resonate with the CI channel.
So I'm curious so about the CI channel. I know the consumer world, they, like we talked about, native 4K and pixel shifting. Was that ever an issue with custom installers? Like, hey, why don't you guys use, native 4K? Has that ever been an issue, or is that something that just doesn't come up in the, custom installers market?
I would say that for people who haven't experienced Epson before, or maybe it's been a long time since they've experienced, Epson projector, or maybe they're thinking, back in the early days of kind of the modern era, let's say, of 4K projection, it was more than just Epson that were utilizing shift technology. So there was this, there were all these kind of competing ideas. There was this 4K shift, and then there was 4K enhanced, and then there's 4K, and one manufacturer was saying it's DCI 4K. And so if you haven't really kept up with kind of the evolution, it is easy to think and not realize that things have changed. So, I'll be the first to admit that there are dealers that I'll go meet for the first time. I'll go do an event, on the road, and bring not only the entire Epson lineup, but I'll bring competitors as well. And we'll do side-by-side comparisons for dealers who haven't experienced what Epson has to deliver. And some of the attendees, the dealers, and I've even done this for end users, for customers that come in and see kind of the dog and pony show. There are plenty of people that come in with this apprehension, right, of I'm going to see that there's going to be this difference in resolution or in clarity or in some kind of visual artifact. And what ends up happening is that everyone who sees this basically walks away with understanding that there is really no difference from a resolution perspective. As you mentioned, if you put the two side by side, there are some people, depending on the scene, where you might be able to detect a slight difference between the two in terms of, we'll call it sharpness. But what everyone walks away understanding and seeing and being impressed with is the greater dynamic range because of the improved brightness. When you think about the hierarchy of how our visual kind of system works, how our eyes and our brains kind of work, brightness and contrast are more impactful. They create more kind of activity within our visual system than anything else. After contrast and brightness, the next thing that's most important to kind of humans is color. So not only color accuracy and color fidelity, but color gradation, color smoothness, richness and natural color becomes the next kind of most impactful. The last thing that's really impactful to our visual systems is actual resolution. Humans actually have very poor resolution kind of perception built in. Our brains are filling in a lot of the gaps in terms of what we see. So it's brightness and contrast are more visually stimulating, followed by color. While resolution is important, it is not nearly as important as the other two. And because of the pixel shifting that Epson offers, we do put all 4K, in terms of 8.3 million pixels on screen, albeit with a shift technology. But there's no question that the improved brightness and contrast, and therefore color volume, is certainly all wins in kind of the Epson column when it comes to our projectors, and especially the new Q Series.
And Jordan, like the proof to that pudding hasn't only been in like the technical reviews of the projectors and the measurements of contrast and color gamut, but what has been more impressive to see is when you're reading through these forums and you see these technical reviewers that do bring in the projectors in their home theaters. They're probably doing side-by-side comparisons, then they're doing a technical evaluation, but their spouses come in and they see the projector on the screen and they say, wow. And like that is, that's all the proof that you really need, where you can begin to understand, just like Easy HT Tech in the chat right here. It's the light output that's just something else, and it's just impressive. It's just simply impressive.
Yeah, I've got the QL7000 coming in on a Monday, so I've been told I'm gonna burn my eyes out, so I'm excited about that.
Get some sunglasses.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. So I know, Rob, you said the pixel shifting 8.3 million pixels on the 5040. It wasn't 8.3, right?
Yes, that's an excellent distinction. So prior to the LS12000, we'll call those projectors Gen 1 pixel shifting. So what you ended up with on screen was technically half 4K resolution at 4.15 million pixels. Now, it's still overall a very good projector, especially the kind of the value kind of comparison you can make with it. But when the LS12000 was released, that shift technology evolved. And so the shift plate, which essentially is a mirror, now shifts on two axes, right? And so you basically have a dual axis shift technology operating at 240 hertz. And that allows us to then get two shifts and essentially quadruple the number of pixels onto the screen, which gives us now the full 8.3 million pixels. So when you think of Epson shift technology, you have kind of the older generation, and some of those projectors are still available today. Melvin mentioned the 4050, that's still sold today.
Okay.
Projectors, like the 4010, those are this Gen 1 pixel shift technology. Those projectors are more about kind of value Performance is there, but they tend to skew a little more toward the value. And then when you have the LS 12,000 and the new Q Series, this introduces now that dual access shift for 8.3 million pixels on screen.
Yeah, when I went from the 5040 and I booted up the LS 12,000, I was like, oh wow, this is much sharper. Like I could instantly tell. So yeah, and then going from the 12,000 to the QB1000, you know, it's not as big as Elite, but it's still a lot better. So you know, it's a testament to what you guys are doing. You guys are listening to the consumers, the CI market, and you know, like I said, most people they're not going to know the difference. Let's see, we got a couple questions that we can address here. MW says, is it easier to have better contrast with lower resolution chips?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. Appreciate you asking that. Remember, contrast has two components, right? Contrast is the relationship between brightness and darkness. And so where the kind of the lower resolution, that certainly is an accurate way to describe it, but just think of it like this. The larger the pixels are in the imager, the easier it is for light to pass through the imager. So what that gives you is your brightness, right? So that's why, for example, the QB1000, which retails for $8,000, and it's 3,300 lumens. If you compare that to other projectors that you might be considering that are in the $8,000 price range, those projectors are going to be considerably dimmer, probably just over 2,000 lumens by comparison. Now, the other kind of component of contrast is darkness. Now, darkness is not as related to the native resolution of the imager itself. There are other techniques you can use to improve darkness. That includes basically dynamic laser. So your laser can dim itself depending on the average picture level, or APL, for any given frame of video you're looking at. So we can control kind of the intra-frame contrast by modulating the laser brightness. You also can add things like mechanical irises, either to the optical path or sometimes within the lens assembly, that functionally do the same thing, that allow for a darker scene, again, overall a darker scene, to have the brightness, in this case mechanically, brought down to improve the overall contrast in a scene-by-scene basis. And so as long as you're able to do a little bit of both of those kind of techniques, improve the peak brightness, which is really beneficial for HDR, as well as ambient light viewing, and then also either modulate the laser with or without a mechanical iris as well, you can significantly improve the contrast. The only other thing I'll add on to contrast that's worth noting is that you can modify contrast performance just via software. So depending on how, you know, your kind of picture quality engineers think a scene should look, there can be dynamic, albeit software contrast that can be added. And one thing you may notice when you're looking at different projectors from different manufacturers is there are different priorities when it comes to how contrast looks for any given scene. No one is particularly right or particularly wrong, but there are slightly different ways that manufacturers tend to approach that level of software contrast. So it's those three things, and that's how they relate to contrast specifically.
Yeah. I just did a projector shootout with the QB1000 and another projector, and obviously, you know, there's the biggest difference is the lumens. But I was just like, man, having 3,300 lumens versus 2,000 lumens, 2,300 lumens, it's just, to me, there's just so much more dynamic range which is a good segue into, you know, brightness or resolution. So, Melvin or Rob, either one of you could take it first. What would you say is more important, brightness or resolution, when it comes to HDR? Because that's what most movies are mastered in now is HDR.
Yeah, go for it.
I've been chatting for a while. You want to jump in?
Well, no, you just talked about it, so maybe you can expand on that.
Sure. I'd be happy to. 1,000% brightness. I mean, it is not possible for me to overstate the importance of brightness to not only HDR but to our visual kind of systems. We respond to brightness. You know, I've been married for many years, and you know, as you do, you go buy a ring, and it's got to be bright and shiny. And why did I spend way too much money on a diamond, right? Because it's bright and shiny, and humans respond positively to bright and shiny. It's just kind of how we're wired. And now when it comes to HDR specifically, one of the biggest challenges with HDR as it relates to projection is that content that is mastered for HDR is mastered at very high levels of dynamic range. Most movies are mastered with a peak luminance of 1,000 nits. That's the most common, because quite frankly, it's the least expensive to produce in terms of post-production. Then you'll have movies that are mastered at either 2,000 nits, maybe 4,000 nits. Occasionally you get a movie mastered at 10,000 nits. Now your projector, regardless of how bright it is not really designed to output that level of brightness. And so there has to be, technically we call it tone mapping, but essentially this kind of interpretation of this very bright, high dynamic range video from your Blu-ray player or your Kaleidoscope or even from your streaming device that then needs to be kind of reinterpreted into a lower dynamic range capability of your projector. And the thing that suffers the most is the highlights and the average picture level and color. And that's because the brightness kind of hit. It's not because the black level changes, it becomes the brightness changes. And so brightness drives most of the HDR experience. I'll give you one quick anecdote. I've had fortunate opportunity several times to kind of meet with and work with and interview directors in Hollywood and cinematographers. And when it comes to HDR, they all say basically the same thing. They like HDR because the brightness affords them the ability to show natural looking color and natural looking highlights. That's the tool that they use. HDR is the tool that they use to deliver this natural bright realism that they just haven't been able to reproduce with SDR. And so again, long story short, brightness over resolution. However, I do want to just one last time as a reminder, just because the projectors are pixel shift doesn't mean you're not getting, all of the resolution on screen. You're just getting it in a different way. And the trade-off is that you get the brightness as opposed to a native 4K resolution where you'll take a significant kind of reduction in brightness, which has kind of this negative effect overall on your HDR viewing.
Yeah, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said too, a lot of times when you see like the native 4K projectors, unless you're talking like a, $70,000, $80,000 projector, if it's native 4K, they're usually going to have much lower lumen count than what you guys are doing, right, with the pixel shifting.
Yeah, it's significantly lower, and that's a combination. And Melvin added a few things that I had kind of explained with pixel shifting. It's a combination of ultimately what's the size of the chassis going to be, how loud is it going to be, how much heat is it going to throw off, and every manufacturer has to evaluate kind of these overall characteristics. If you go out and buy yourself a $200,000, 6-chip DLP projector, well, it's the size of a coffee table. But that's fine because for that customer, the projector has its own room that it lives in with its own HVAC system. And again, I got no problem with anyone who wants to buy that projector. Those are incredible machines. But when it comes to Epson, in order to be able to deliver high brightness in a compact chassis that is quiet, something has to be kind of analyzed and adjusted. And Epson, quite frankly, benefited from sticking to its guns for years with pixel shifting and improving pixel shifting to the point where it's virtually indistinguishable from native 4K, but now gets to reap the benefit of higher brightness. And that really is key to the overall kind of not only HDR, but the long-term performance of projection for brighter rooms, bigger screens.
Definitely, yeah. So let's talk about those that new Q Series lineup. So, like I said, I was at CEDIA last year when they announced these Q Series lineup, and of course, I have the QB1000 in my home theater. But Melvin, do you want to tell us what's the newest gear or technology that you guys implemented on the series, the QB1000, 3000, and 7000?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, across the board, What you see here is, you know, all 4K, all 8.3 million pixels on the screen. And then in terms of step up across the line, you're seeing step ups, obviously in terms of price point, but also in lumens, right? So we're going from 3,300 lumens in the QB1000 to 6,000 lumens in the QL3000 and 10,000 lumens in the QL7000. And as Rob mentioned, like dollar per lumen, it's really hard to beat what price point these projectors are at. Just because of our strategy of using a 3-chip, 3 LCD engine, and then pixel shifting, the laser light source using a fixed phosphor wheel instead of a spinning wheel. I'm sorry, fixed phosphor instead of using a phosphor wheel. Just the entire architecture throughout the lineup is a testament to Epson's compact, precise, and efficient motto for products. You're also going to see step ups in video processing. We do deploy HDMI 2.1 throughout the lineup, so that allows us to achieve HDR10 plus in the QB1000 up to HDR10. All across the board, we are able to do dynamic tone mapping to really get great high dynamic range performance. And depending on the screen size, consistently we are able to hit the desired digital cinema initiatives 300 nits off the screen to be able to achieve that level of performance. So quite impressive in terms of performance. Because it's got HDMI 2.1, all support up to 4K 120 hertz of signaling. We've also integrated auto low latency mode. This is new to the Epson lineup. So auto low latency mode, along with HDMI 2.1's 4K 120 signaling, this makes these projectors great for gamers. VRX cinema lens in the QB1000. It's a motorized lens. So, you know, you don't, for all across the board, these are motorized lenses. You don't need to, you know, get a guy on the ladder to adjust your lens while you're right up against the screen, like trying to figure out, like, you know, it's not a two-man job, right? To adjust the lens, the focus, and the lens shift. And let's see, what am I missing here? Man, I mean, it's just like choose your screen size, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the setup, choose your screen size and choose where you want to put it. Because what we're trying to do here with this lineup is, as Rob mentioned, provide a great cinematic experience with HDR performance, but give our users, give our custom integration community the ability to put projection anywhere, whether it be a dark room cinema or in a room with some ambient light.
So, and that HDMI 2.1, is that 40 gigabits per second or 48?
40. It's 40. So yeah, we don't need the full bandwidth of 48 gigabits per second because we're doing up to 4K 120. So okay. we're able to support that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, and the QL 7000 or the 3000 and 7000 are new for, I know you mentioned it, so it's customizable, but it has removable lenses, right? So you want to talk about the different lens option that's kind of new for Epson this year.
Yeah, go for it, Rob.
Sure. Well, I wouldn't say that it's not actually new for Epson, but it is new for Epson for this class of projection, right? Okay. So, you know, Epson obviously makes a ton of projectors for kind of our commercial business, and that's everything from, you know, boardrooms to outdoor projection, doing, you know, kind of projection mapping onto outdoor surfaces. And so that kind of business requires a lot of different lens options because your physical location is going to vary wildly, right? But this is the first time that we have basically brought a residential high-performance theater projector with interchangeable lenses. And the primary benefit that offers is installation flexibility. There are certainly been times where, based on a target screen size and the size of the room, right, that a projector isn't going to work, or you have to compromise on something. You can't go as big as you wanted to on your screen, or the projector can't go against the back wall. It's got to be pushed forward into the space because there's the relationship between the screen and the projection distance. With interchangeable lenses, we largely can just solve all of those. For the QL models, there's basically a dozen different lenses just based on the throw distance that you need, right? All the way from ultra short, we call it the snorkel lens. It looks like a kind of a sideways U that allows the projector to be placed incredibly close to the screen. I actually spec'd one of those just the other day for a rear projection system. So behind the screen, there was a couple feet, and the projector actually lives behind the screen and projects then on the glass that's been treated with projection film. So you can do that with an ultra short throw. And we have that all the way up to a very long throw lens. So it provides kind of the designer, or again, the end user, the customer, to really have a lot of flexibility. What's the screen size of your dreams? Where would you ideally put the projector within this space? And chances are that there is a combination of projector and lens from Epson that will fit that need. When you start looking at outside of Epson, pretty much all the projectors that kind of we compete with in kind of the price categories that we compete at, we largely are the only ones that offer interchangeable lens. If you want to get into interchangeable lens outside of Epson, that's where you're in kind of the really upper echelon, close to six figures, if not over six figures, for very bespoke kind of projectors. Cool projectors, but very kind of esoteric. So Epson is also creating kind of a new concept for customers and flexibility. The idea here, the way I've described it, is largely this. At the end of the day, I want to be able to provide a projection solution to a customer and not have to solve for the projector's too loud or the projector's power hungry. All these projectors run off a standard 110 power, right? So you don't need to run a high power line. They're compact, they're quiet. We make them both white and black so they can blend into the ceiling a little bit more, kind of uniformly. And then we have all these lenses so you can place the projector where you want. So at the end of the day, you don't end up, blowing up your dream theater because of something as simple as the projector's too loud or the lens doesn't allow me to place it where I wanted to place it. So I can't do what I wanted to do. And that's really what we're trying to solve here with the interchangeable lens system.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then you also have anamorphic support as well, correct?
Yeah, so
lenses?
anamorphic support, yeah, as well. So essentially, if you pair the projector with an optical, anamorphic kind of lens, whether it's a squeeze lens or a stretch lens, you can pair that with the Epson projector. So if you're using kind of a anamorphic, kind of stretch, or horizontal stretch lens, we would do the vertical compression digitally in the projector, and then optically it will then be stretched back out. So that support is built in. Of course, you mentioned that you were using MadVR with your system, and so there's another option to do, kind of adjustments digitally, 100% in the digital realm. And the Epson projectors also support, 10 different lens memory positions. So different points where you can zoom in or shift up and down depending on the type of experience you're looking for. So if you ended up deploying, a CinemaScope style screen, whether it's 235:1 or 237 or 240:1, you could then within the projector zoom in for a 16:9. So you're watching sports, full screen, no stretch, no distortion, and then you can zoom back out for movies, and you only have to make a decision that's painful when you're watching Christopher Nolan, who can't make up his mind, right. And his movie is 3 aspect ratios. There's no fix for that.
Yeah. So, and then with the interchangeable lenses, what is with the 3000 and 7000, what is the maximum size screen that you can achieve with those?
So the maximum size screen is really based on two things. There's a hard maximum, which is essentially the focal kind of limitations of a lens, right? Okay. A lens can focus so much this direction and so much that direction. That's really not the most interesting, factor, to be perfectly honest, because quite frankly, most of these lenses have these kind of focal distances from something like 60 inches to 1,000 inches. Okay, so no one's going to deploy a 1,000-inch screen. Your primary limitation with any projector is going to be based on brightness, because you want sufficient brightness to illuminate the screen for any given application. So Melvin mentioned it earlier, the DCI, or the Digital Cinema Initiative, February of last year, released their new standards. And I use the word standards. This is not a recommendation. DCI is made up of Hollywood studios, projection companies that basically say this is how movies are going to be shot, distributed, and exhibited moving forward. And so their new standard is 300 nits for both projection and large video wall, plus or minus 10%. So 270 to 330 in terms of nits is your target. Okay. So when you take a look at the various projectors that Epson has available, we would consider your screen size, your screen aspect ratio, the gain of your screen, how reflective it is, and then we could determine how much, in terms of lumen output you need to hit a given standard. So it's not as simple as to say, well, the 7,000, you're going to get the 7,000 on Monday and review it, but the 7,000 is not better than the QL3000. It's just used when you need more brightness, either because your screen is larger or your ambient conditions are different, or you have a different preference for how an image is supposed to look. And that's one of the nice things I think about the Epson lineup, is that there's not really a difference in terms of feature set. It's not like, this projector has lens memory and this one doesn't, or, this one has a better processor than that one, or, this one does HDMI 2.1, but that one only does, 2.0. From a feature set, they're basically all doing the same thing. The question is, how much brightness do you need for your specific application? Then we know which projector is going to work. And if you happen to need 6,000 or 10,000 lumens, then we take the extra step of saying, and which lens works for your given space.
Okay. So along that lines of nits, and I know the ideal way would be to have, calibrator come in and calibrate your projector, but is there a way for people that maybe can't afford that? Is there a way to actually, find how many nits, or calculate the nits that, if you have a projector or a projector screen, like mine's 110 inches, it's got a 1.0 gain, and I have the QB1000, how would I go about determining how many nits I'm actually getting from, 12 feet or whatever?
Sure. There are several tools that you can use, but because I'm wearing this Epson shirt, what I will recommend is that Epson has a throw distance calculator. There's no login required. It's open to the public. But essentially, if you just Google search for Epson calculator, Epson projector calculator, something like that, you're going to end up on this page. Basically, what the tool allows you to do, its primary function, is to enter a screen size, and then you can select, any projector that Epson makes. If it's interchangeable lens, it will tell you all the lens options that projector has. It's primarily designed to say, for that given screen size, here's the installation range, minimum and maximum distance where your projector can be placed. But it also calculates the on-screen brightness in nits for you as well. So you can go ahead and basically have the calculator do the work. If you want to do the work yourself, there is a formula where you can convert essentially lumens and screen size into foot lamberts, because, we believe in freedom units here in America. We don't like nits, which are based in meters. So we like foot lamberts, and then when you just convert foot lamberts to nits, you basically multiply it by 3.3, and you end up with nits anyway. But I would say that using the Epson tool is, I think, the simplest tool that I've found, at least so far, that allows you to do multiple things at once. Select the projector brightness, select the lens, select the screen size and aspect ratio, and then it will just tell you the on-screen brightness for a given screen gain. And that'll tell you kind of, are you within range of this much brightness for your application? Is a great place to start.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look that up and utilize that. So before we get into comments, Melvin, can you talk about if the tariffs, does that affect Epson in any way? If people want to go and, buy QB 1000 and 3000, 7000, are you guys affected by tariffs, inventory, and stuff like that?
The answer is absolutely. And we have been responsive, and sometimes responsive is good, sometimes responsive is bad. Because when we respond and we make price changes and the tariffs go away, then we have to respond again, and then I become busy guy here. But yeah, absolutely, the tariffs have impacted us, as has other happenings across the globe, like precious materials. The price has gone up, or it's become unavailable. Like certain magnets that we use are sometimes hard to get. But yes, we have had to make some price adjustments to some of our products, and those products that are made in countries where the tariffs are higher, you're going to see that those products, they have an adjustment in price point. Now, in the CI channel, we strategically tried to make price moves such that it does not impact either the customer or the retailer so much. We tried to strategically introduce products at a price point, and typically what we'll do is we'll just keep the price at that level. We won't increase, we won't decrease. We'll try to keep it as stable as possible, but adjust on the backside. So the conversation between the retailer and the end user, that can continue to happen. And then there's faith in Epson providing this product because we do have availability. We have reliable supply that has been really good for us, being that Epson is a vertically oriented company. We are end-to-end controlling the design, the production, the shipping from our factories in the Philippines, in China, in Japan, of these products directly to Epson-owned warehouses in America and across the globe. We control end-to-end pretty much the whole solution in terms of the projector. So yes, the tariffs have affected us, and we are making some price increases. We're also early discounting some of the models that are made in countries where the projectors are affected by tariffs more significantly. But it's with good timing, because typically these projectors are lamp-based. We're seeing a slowdown in sales anyway because they're at the end of their lifetime. We're just kind of like making an early exit and even introducing newer models in its place that could continue to help the dealer stay in business, as well as give more technology, give more of a better product to our end users.
Great. Thank you for shedding light on that. So get your stuff now if you can, guys. If you're you never know what's going to happen. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. So we have MW says, oh, we already did that one. Is there anything new coming for short throw projectors?
I can answer that to an extent. Well, I want to say that we did recently announce the QS100 series of ultra short throw projectors. We launched these on the US side in North America in April. I see that there are folks here from Europe, and Epson Europe did launch a tad bit earlier, but we did launch a series of UST projectors, ultra short throw projectors, targeted at the CI channel. And what the CI channel wanted is obviously a model that was designed for them. Number one, they wanted IP control. Number two, they wanted a flexible projector where they can add their own sources. And number three, they wanted a flexible projector where they could add their own audio solution. So with that, we launched the QS100 at a slightly higher retail price than the LS800 off the same platform, but we gave them a little bit more lumens, 500 lumens, IP control capability, as well as audio-less options, so that they can go ahead and add their own, either if it's a sound bar, or if it's an audio video receiver, or separates audio system with a full-blown, up to whatever you want, 11.4.4 Dolby Atmos system. You have that capability and flexibility with the QS100. So that is new from Epson, just recently launched in April. And we do have a couple more projectors in the roadmap that I can't speak about today, but they will be coming soon, shortly. They'll be announced shortly.
Okay. And before we get on to the other questions, I forgot to ask earlier. So, Rob, you were talking about like chassis size and how that, determines the like light output and stuff. Now with the LS12000, that one was 2,700 lumens or 2,700?
Yes,
2,700 lumens. And with the QB1000, exact same chassis, 3,300 lumens. So how are you guys able to crank out an extra, what is that? 600 lumens from the same chassis?
Yeah, 600 lumens, about 22% brighter. So with that, again, you brought up an excellent question when it relates to kind of the compact nature, the quiet, and the thermals. So the other thing that improved is essentially the actual laser modules themselves. So the laser modules, just as we move forward through time and things are better manufactured, the modules themselves became physically smaller. The brightness output of the modules also increased. And then we changed how we actually kind of integrated the modules into kind of the heatsink. So now they are directly mounted to an internal heatsink within the projector itself. So size down, which means we can put more of them in that physical space. The brightness of each module goes up, and then we were able to better control the thermals through essentially, more sophisticated kind of internal thermal management while keeping the chassis the same. So for, your perfect example, especially if you were an early adopter of the LS12000, the QB1000 represents a pretty decent upgrade in terms of brightness. The black level's also been improved, as well as the better processor and HDR tone mapping, or dynamic HDR tone mapping has all kind of been included. But because it's the exact same chassis with the same lens, you could physically just pull down your LS12000 and put the QB1000 in that exact location, and everything else will still work in terms of the geometry, for the zoom. So that was important. And those kind of iterations and improvements continue to happen within kind of the light output, in and of itself. But still, the biggest kind of difference between, kind of what Epson is able to offer and other manufacturers is tied to the shift technology. It's just a more efficient, imager. So while all manufacturers benefit, year over year, decade over decade with better light engines, because Epson uses a more light efficient, panel itself that the light has to pass through, we will tend to kind of maintain this leadership position when it comes to brightness.
Cool. Let's see. MW says, isn't HDR not just brightness, but literally the contrast and color volume?
Yes, absolutely. So, when I started talking about, kind of contrast, again, contrast is that relationship between brightness and darkness. Now, for most projectors essentially, unlike, flat panel televisions, not to bring up too much, kind of love for flat panel TVs, but, unlike flat panel televisions, whether they're OLED based or LCD based, flat panel TVs have the ability to do some kind of localized light control, whether that's full array, local dimming, mini LED, micro LED, or of course, OLED, right? Pixel by pixel self illumination. Projectors don't have this technology, right? So essentially, you'll have multiple modules in your laser array if you have a laser projector, but all that light blends into basically a single light output. It's either on or it's off, or you can dim it, but the entire laser is dimmed or boosted uniformly. And so there essentially becomes a limit to your black level, let's say, that a projector can produce. So if you want better contrast, and then as you pointed out, color volume, which is the relationship between contrast and color gamut, right? How you get that is through brightness. So brightness is the primary lever that you pull to improve contrast in a projector system. The engineering challenge is I want to increase brightness, but I don't want to drag my black level, right? I don't want to drag my darkness up along with brightness. So it's a combination of several technologies. Maintain black level where it is, or as much as possible. Improve brightness and improve color gamut, which, as you pointed out, you're 100% right, gives you more color volume. That's really the key. So brightness is a vehicle for color volume in terms of HDR.
So that makes sense now, because I never understood it when you explain what DCI is. Whenever you see a product that says, 95% of the DCI, I forget how it's actually worded, but that's actually talking
DCI
about
P3.
DCI P3.
DCI P3 color space.
Okay. And Epson projectors.
Yeah. So the thing about color space that's interesting. Not a little short tangent here. When we talk about color space, whether that's Rec 709 or DCI P3, BT 2020, essentially this is the color range at a single fixed brightness. And then, how red can you go, how blue and how green, and you kind of create essentially a triangle. Color volume is that same triangle, but now expressed through contrast, right? As you increase kind of the brightness of each of those colors or the darkness of the color. There's not a uniform way currently that the industry measures color volume, because it's the relationship of these two kind of vertices. So we have kind of the color gamut, DCI P3 being the color space that Hollywood essentially uses. 709 is essentially the broadcast standard for SDR. And then BT 2020 is essentially not really used today. It's a container, but the Hollywood hasn't really changed. They're still operating in DCI P3. So that's this kind of slice within your brightness range. And then you hope to maintain that wide color gamut, but also express that color gamut throughout this high dynamic range from bright to dark. You do all of that, you have an amazing picture.
Yep. And the Epson projector, at least, the one I have, the QB1000 and the LS 12,000, beautiful picture. So I know that 7,000 is going to look pretty sweet.
Yeah, you'll love it.
Palindrome Guy says, for someone who has never seen an Epson projector, which model is the equivalent to the best that cinema has to offer? 6050, 12,000, QB1000, or QL7000?
You or me, Melvin?
I mean, I'm gonna say it just depends on your screen size and what kind of room that you have, right? With our new lineup, we provide flexibility. So depending on your screen size, the room that you're projecting in, if you have ambient light or not. If you have a huge room with more ambient light, go for the QL7000. If you have a more dedicated home theater system, the QB1000. If you want nearly the best of both worlds, the QL3000. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, no, I largely agree. Again, I think especially with the Q series, the difference between the QB and the two QL models is essentially brightness and then interchangeable lenses, right? But interchangeable lenses are just there to solve a problem if you have that problem. So ultimately, between those three projectors, it's just a relationship of what your kind of on-screen brightness target is going to be. I do think that since you also added the 6000 series and the LS 12,000, I would say that the Q series does represent the best of cinema today because of, as Melvin mentioned earlier, the new processor supports dynamic tone mapping. So dynamic tone mapping allows the projector on a frame-by-frame basis to make different tone mapping decisions based on the unique kind of brightness requirements or contrast requirements for each frame of video in isolation, not related to each other. So you can get the best possible performance throughout a piece of content that has very dynamic and ever-changing, contrast. So those models, the Q series specifically, I would tend to kind of put forward as the best of what's available today from Epson for that reason. Beyond that, it largely is just a question of how much brightness do you need for your application, which is just a question of what's your screen size. And do you want to watch with the lights on, or are you always going to watch with the lights off?
So I have a question. So if somebody buys a Q Series projector, and maybe they say, "Hey, I don't have time to get it calibrated yet right now." Out of the box, what would be your recommended settings, like the best settings for? I mainly watch movies and HDR content.
Sure. Well, with the new Q series, there are 4 picture modes. So in the LS12,000, there were a few additional. I think there were 6 in total. Mm-hmm. But right. With the new projectors, you have 4 picture modes. You have dynamic, vivid, cinema, and natural. Essentially, I tend to push people toward cinema mode. Cinema mode, I find, is the best balance of kind of color accuracy, but also it's tuned to be used in a home environment, which is not perfect, right? If you have a perfect environment, right, then you could use natural mode. Natural mode essentially is the most color accurate out of the box, but a lot of the kind of advanced processing tricks that the projector has available are either turned off or they're kind of tuned down quite a bit. And I'm not just talking about like motion interpolation, but everything that your processor can do to help account for your environment, which isn't perfect, but also your source that isn't perfect. So natural is the most accurate out of the box, but cinema mode, I think, provides for the vast majority of customers the best out of the box experience. Now, if you want to be super nerdy, I'll give you one. For anyone who owns an Epson projector, these are my settings out of the box. You go into cinema mode, you start there. Then you're going to go into the menu, you're going to go into white balance, and you're going to adjust the white balance on the QB1000. The default value is 9. You're going to change that to 7. On the QLs, the white balance is going to say 7500 K, 7500 Kelvin. You're going to reduce that to 6500 Kelvin. If you do that, you've basically made your colors the same as natural mode. So your white point is spot on, which means your grayscale will be spot on. And then all of the other processing kind of enhancements are still turned on because you're in cinema mode. So that's what I would do. That's my poor man's calibration. And I don't mean that as a joke for poor man. I'm a calibrator. I have all of the calibration equipment. I don't even bother to bust it out. I just make those adjustments, and that's good enough for me. I'm ready to go.
And that reminds me too, you can also use Kalman software on these projectors. Correct?
Yeah, you absolutely can. It's certainly compatible. Now, not auto cal, right? So it doesn't automatically calibrate itself, but it is certainly compatible with outboard calibration software. Yeah.
Okay. Home Theater Denmark says, does Epson have any Danish people on YouTube that reviews these projectors?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd search on YouTube, number one. We do have Epson Europe, so I could definitely try and find out if we've got people on that side of the pond that would be willing to, dole out a projector for review. Yeah,
If I need to fly over there with the projector, I'm willing to do it.
Business trip.
1,000%.
William Kramer says, will you be able to get ultra black level contrast numbers on your QL projectors in the future?
Yeah, ultra black Epson technology. We're always looking at ways to improve our picture quality. Overall, you will be seeing projectors in the near future. We are continuing to invest in different technologies, whether it be the light source, the light engine, resolution, video processing. But absolutely, we're striving to best ourselves in terms of what's the state of the art and what we're able to achieve while still maintaining compact, precise, and efficient. That's been a design philosophy at Epson, and we want to be able to achieve the best of our products for you guys.
All right, and it looks like the last question that we have is also William Kramer. He says, will you continue to offer bulb-based solutions?
Yeah, we're starting to phase bulb-based solutions out. So There is a new projector that we will be launching this fall that effectively replaces our last Pro Cinema 4050 projector, which is bulb base. So you will start to see bulb base phase out, not completely discontinued, but yes, we are trending more towards laser light source and different other types of light sources.
And what would be the, I don't know if we may have touched on it earlier. So along that question, what are the benefits of going towards laser? I know what the benefits of it, but for the audience, what are the benefits of going towards laser and phasing out, bulb technology?
Well, there are actually several. One from a usability standpoint, right? Laser tends to generate less heat than lamp, so it can allow us to continue to maintain compact chassis while brightness goes up, right? It also has a faster power on, power off cycle, and then ultimately a longer lifespan. Now, the opposite side of that coin with the lifespan is that the laser itself is not user replaceable. But you are talking, 20,000 hours is essentially the half-life, for a laser-based system. But the other thing that I don't think that gets enough attention when it comes to kind of the laser light engine is color accuracy and fidelity, color performance, really, when you think about it. So just like old, flat panel TVs, if you go back to, the CCFL, the compact fluorescent tube-based TVs, the kind of the thick LCDs back in the day, if you go all the way back to those, or the first generation of LED-based LCD televisions, they used a white light source, which is what a lamp basically uses. The problem is that white light isn't something that we create in a laboratory. White light is a mixture of all these other colors. And because it's a mixture of all these other colors, you end up with kind of variations. It's not as controllable. It's not as predictable. Lasers are essentially, modern projectors, the vast majority of them are using blue laser. So, and the same thing with televisions, by the way. Fun fact, LCD and OLED use a blue light source. And that's done for two reasons. Blue is very highly energetic, much more so than the other primary colors. And we can use technologies like phosphor, or in the case of a television, quantum dot, for example, to change blue light into red or green to give you the full RGB kind of primary color value. So blue is much more energetic. It's also more reliable in terms of its manufacturing tolerances. So it's more predictable, it's more precise, and it allows us to not only produce more accurate color than kind of a white based light source, but also more color volume, because sometimes the differences between one shade or one hue of red and the next, they're very close to each other. And so if your tolerance of your light engine isn't that high, you may not be able to regularly distinguish between those colors in effect. So that's really the other benefit. And again, it doesn't get as much love or talk about. So we mostly talk about it lasts longer, it's cooler, it turns on quickly, it turns off quickly. But for me personally, I'm a picture quality guy. If a projector lamp lasts longer or shorter, just tell me the color is better and you've got my attention.
Yeah, I only changed the bulb on my 5040 once, but I was like, you know what? I'm good. I don't think I ever need to do this again. So when you guys went to the laser, I was like, all right, this is cool. And I mean, 20,000 hours, that's what with like your projector on 8 hours a day for however many years, if you're watching it straight. I mean, I don't think I would ever have an issue with the laser, going out for
more than
20 years.
8 hours a day is just under 3,000 hours annually, right? So, and that's a long time for a projector to be running, for any one given day. So, I used to tell people it's like watching a movie a day every day for like 10 plus years. 20,000 hours is a good chunk of change in terms of performance. And also keep in mind, that's the half-life. It doesn't mean that the laser is no longer usable. It does mean that in the worst case scenario, your laser will be operating after 20,000 hours at half of its rated brightness that was at day one. that may, for your application, necessitate its replacement, especially if you're pushing your projector like to the limit in terms of your screen size and what you're trying to achieve. That's also one of the other, kind of a weird tangent here, but it's one of the other side benefits of sometimes speccing or choosing to purchase, if you're a customer, choosing to purchase a projector that's brighter than you actually need, because it enables you to run the projector not at 100% all the time. You could run it at 60%, 50%. And that does two things. It extends the life of the laser. It also runs even quieter because the fan spins at even a slower speed. So there are kind of advantages to maybe investing in a little bit more brightness just from a longevity kind of play if 20,000 hours is the concern.
Yeah, so when the LS12000 came out, they had some Epson reps come down here in Houston at one of the dealers, and they were showing us, and this is what I'm doing now. He said, what I recommend is you put your laser at 70%, and then that way, you know, however many years you realize that it's starting to look dim, you still have a little bit of dynamic range to boost that up. Whereas if you just put it at 100%,
it's all done.
Right. So yeah, so that's what I have mine at. I have mine at, I think it's at 70%, and then maybe for some obscure content, I may bump it up to 75%. But yeah, and it's still plenty bright with the Mad VR. It looks great.
So fun fact, in my theater, I have the QL3000, so 6,000 lumens, and it's 135-inch Lambertian screen, so gain of 1.0.
Nice.
And I have 3 presets: 100%, laser output when I have the lights on and I just want to show off. Then I run it at 60% to hit 300 nits for HDR, and I run it at 30% to hit 100 nits, so I can do like reference SDR when I'm in the mood for like a reference SDR. I basically run the thing as close to being off as possible. But I basically have these different, instantly recallable presets, so that when I'm watching, James Spader in Stargate from 1990s, that's like, oh, that's SDR, and I want to watch, Marvel, that's HDR today, and I turn on sports, I turn the lights on, and I let the projector run at full tilt, and you have those experiences.
So Anthony says, why would you need to extend the life of a laser projector? It's like 15 years in maximum use.
No, I think that's a great point, Anthony, and I'm just pointing out that there are ways that you can extend if necessary. 15 years is already a very long time. I think that in 15 years, projectors will be even significantly better than they are today. So it very well may be time to upgrade, if nothing else. But the long story short is this: what drives your light engine down, whether it's laser or lamp, is just heat and time. It's just those two things, right? So if you are generating less heat, you extend the life. That also means if you pumped frigid air into your projector, you could extend its life. But as a manufacturer, we don't assume you're going to do that.
Yeah.
I don't assume you're going to have dry ice in your theater room. So for kind of standard operating ambient conditions, Epson, as well as other manufacturers, will then measure the expected half-life of those light sources. In the case of laser, 20,000 hours.
Great. Well, it looks like that's all the questions that we have. We're right.
I agree, Anthony. By the way, I just saw your other comment.
Oh, I see. Yeah, he says I go full 100% no matter what. I want to use the engine I paid for.
Yeah,
that's
full tilt.
Yeah, you pay the money for it. Use it the way you want it to. And like you said, you still have 20,000 hours half life. I mean, that's insane. So, yeah. Well, Melvin, Rob, appreciate having you guys on. I don't know if I'll be at CEDIA again this year because I think I'm doing a home theater tour the next week in another city. But always a pleasure to talk with you guys, man. You guys are a wealth of knowledge. Love what you guys are doing over at Epson. Really love your projectors, and I'm excited to get the 7,000 in and test it. But yeah, I think what you guys are doing is super exciting, and you guys are shaking up the market and making the other competitors, bring it.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. As far as I'm concerned, Jordan, I love to be here and do this, and I hope that the community that was watching and anyone who comes and watches, the recording afterwards, is able to get something out of it. And do yourselves a favor, if you haven't had a chance to see Epson in person, I'd encourage you to do so. We're really, as Jordan mentioned, our goal is to shake the tree. Our goal is to show that projection has a, pun intended, very bright future ahead of it.
Yeah, and if you guys are, I'm assuming you guys are going to be at CEDIA again. So if you guys want to come out to CEDIA, that's what, September
3rd through the 6th.
September 3rd through the 6th.
Right.
Yeah, come check them out. So
yep.
It's impressive.
Thanks for the time, Jordan. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
Yep. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you stay tuned to the channel because I will have that review probably in a couple weeks of the QL 7000, so you won't want to miss that. All right, man. You guys have a great weekend.